The following stories are from the subreddit NoSleep. Story 1. When I was a kid, I had terrible night terrors. I would have these heinous scenes right in my living room. Things I feel a child shouldn't even know about, much less imagine. Specialists would later tell me this was the root of my insomnia and my sociophobia. I do remember quite a bit about the night terrors, but that's not what this is about. This is about a warning. Things that I have been made aware of over the past 24 years, I'm 25 now, my night terrors started when I was 5, that have seemed to finally catch up with me. I want to share my knowledge before my plan comes to fruition. I was made aware of them when I was about 9 years old. A little bit about my living situation at the time that will help the context of my first discovery. I grew up pretty poor, by American standards at least. One-bedroom apartment with myself, my sister, and my father. My sister and I shared the bedroom up until I was around 5 or 6, and my father slept in the living room. When I was 7, we upgraded to a small 2-bedroom apartment. My sister got one bedroom, and my father and I shared the other. My father had really bad sleep apnea when I was a kid, so it was near impossible to actually sleep in the same room as him. Eventually, I started sleeping on the couch instead, which is why earlier I mentioned the height of my night terrors being in my living room. One night, a couple of years after moving into the larger apartment, I woke up at around 1 a.m. This was pretty normal for me since by this time my sleeping patterns were all over the place. The layout of our apartment wasn't anything special. It was maybe 500 square foot in total. The living room, dining room and kitchen were all in one straight line. If the window in the kitchen were open, and our sliding glass back patio door were also open, you could see right through our entire apartment. So, normally, when I would wake up I would walk over to the fridge and get something to drink. Personally, I have always loved milk, so it was my go-to for late-night thirst-quenching sessions, even though milk does a terrible job of quenching thirst. This night was no different. My 9-year-old self wandered the maximum 15 feet over to the kitchen from the couch, drank a glass of milk, and began to head back to bed. As I was walking back to the couch, I saw someone standing on my back patio. There was about a 3 to 4 inch space between the wall and those typical tentacle-style blinds that hung and swayed between the ceiling to the floor. Within this space, I saw a man, or rather, the shadow of a man. It was as if this black mass was stained onto the patio door itself, rather than someone physically standing there. I'll never forget what that surge of adrenaline felt like. As a 9-year-old, I wasn't really sure what to do. Adrenaline kicked in and everything was in slow motion. I recall taking 3 to 4 leap-like steps back to my bed, the couch, and I felt like I was moving so fast and slow at the same time. Similar to the way the movie Wanted portrays those dudes that could make their heart beat so fast that everything slows down. Once I was close enough to my couch, I leapt onto it for what felt like a 30-second hang time in the air. I was terrified. Once I hit the couch, everything went back to normal speed, and as any small child would, I covered my head with my blanket. The blanket always made me feel safe when I was frightened. There's actually a good reason for this that I'll discuss further into this testimony. I eventually ended up just falling asleep under my blankets. 2 days later is when I knew it wasn't my imagination or a nightmare. I was at my friend Justin Thompson's house. It was Saturday night, and I was staying over for the weekend. My father often went on long trips when I was a kid, so other families had the pleasure of taking in a rambunctious 9-year-old kid. Justin was a bit older than me. I think he was 10, maybe 11 at the time. Of course, like most little boys in the 90s, we played outside a lot, and once it was time to come in for the night, we would watch movies or play video games, tell scary stories, all that jazz. I personally enjoyed watching horror movies. I felt like it helped me cope with my night terrors easier, seeing fictional horrors up on the screen to help remind me it wasn't real. At about 2 to 2:30 that morning, I was still awake. I was watching some old movie on Nick at Night or whatever channel it was, just passing the time, when I saw a man again. I was laying on the floor facing the television. The TV was placed right in front of Justin's bedroom window. A break in the movie occurred, causing the room to become dark for a split second. The blinds were completely open, and there he or it was. Again, a shadow person? It looked like the shadow of a man, but it didn't go past the window. It's hard to explain since I didn't take my time gawking at it. I immediately drew the covers over my entire body as I had done with my first experience. This time was different though. This time, I heard noises. Small scratches at the window's pane. Then after a minute or so of scratching, the television signal began to fade and all I heard in the room was white noise. The fear was overwhelming and I passed out. The last thing I noticed before covering myself with a blanket was that Justin was fast asleep with no blanket on. The next day, Justin wasn't the same. It wasn't that he was lethargic or catatonic or any type of similar disposition. In fact, he seemed happier than before. He was just different. Like that was no longer my friend. It was as if something replaced him overnight. He didn't want to eat anything all day long, and his eyes were just different, lifeless. He also kept repeating himself over and over, just overall acting so strange. Out of fear, I remember some of the conversation we had that day. Justin would say things like, "Let's go to the woods. Go to the woods, go to the woods. Woods. I like that word. Woods. I really want to go to the woods. We find good things in the woods." When I declined to go into the woods with him, he got all pissy and said, "Well, why don't you go to sleep then? Let's go to sleep. Sleep is nice too. Sleep, sleep, sleep." I remember him saying sleep 3 times very quickly, almost like he was panting it out. Those words were coming out with forceful exhales. Fucking creeped me out. Unfortunately, as a kid, there wasn't much else I could do since his parents were watching me for the weekend. And Sunday night was no picnic. All night, I could hear him whispering to himself. I didn't catch any of it because I just laid with my blanket over my head all night attempting not to shit myself. But I kept hearing him giggling to himself and whispering a full-on conversation. The one thing I actually heard him say was, "Oh yes, we will get him. Hollow him out. Make his eyes right. We'll get him." And eventually repeating, "Sleep, sleep, sleep," over and over again. I didn't see Justin again after that. Not only because I was too afraid to hang out with him, but shortly after that incident his family disappeared and we never saw him around. For a long time I figured I was just dreaming, having a night terror, fabricating some shit from watching too many horror movies or whatever. But after a while I knew I wasn't making things up. What I experienced was one of the hollow people, and I assure you they latch onto a target. For years I saw these fuckers everywhere. It was like I could just sense who they were or where they were. Just walking down the street, I would get glances from people. Every time they would give me the same blank look. No blinking, no smiling. Just an empty stare without taking their eyes off of me. Have you ever felt an eerie sense that someone was watching you? Have you ever felt that in your own house? Watch the shadows. They'll move if you watch long enough. Don't forget your blanket. My next experience was when I was 14. It was my birthday, and I had a few friends staying the night. This is normally where you would insert some cheesy horror movie scene where we all decided to pull out the Ouija board or something. Not in my case. For whatever reason, I didn't need to do anything to provoke them. It was a normal night with friends. We were just hanging out, watching movies and playing video games. The normal things 14-year-old boys do. By this point in time, I was a little braver than I was when I was 9. We also had been doing a bit better financially and upgraded to a new house. So around 4 in the morning, my friend Guy, actually his name, and I were the only ones still awake with the other adolescent bodies strung across the living room. While we were on the couch, we started hearing noises from my front porch. At a quick glance, it looked like someone walked right by the window going towards my front door. Guy and I were both giving each other that, "Did you see that, or am I crazy?" look for a second, and both looked toward the front door. Then we heard a noise coming from the back door kitchen area. We both jumped off the couch to look toward the back door. We saw the shadow of someone walking outside. Actually, it appeared that multiple people were walking by every window simultaneously. As we were standing between the dining room and the living room, something slammed into the front door. It literally shook the front wall of my house, it was so hard. Loud enough to where now everyone in the room was awake and looking around wondering what was going on. Now, I will say I was definitely considering that these were my uninvited visitors that had haunted me for so long coming to say hello, but I had never before had one of them attempt to literally break into the room. Once everyone was awake, it seemed nobody was outside any longer, so we went out to the front window to investigate. We saw the flashing blue and red of an ambulance at the end of my street, which was only 2 houses down. With the strange occurrences from previously in the night, we started running towards the wreckage of a truck. This truck had hit the telephone pole at the end of the street and flipped. When we approached the wreck, police stopped us promptly. The officer who stopped us seemed creeped out and in a frantic way asked us, "Have you boys seen anything strange? Anyone walking around?" So we told him what we saw earlier in the night. He then told us, "Whoever wrecked this truck is gone. Nobody is in the vehicle, and it seems as if no one was ever driving." The strangest part about the whole situation is that we were 2 houses down, and we never heard a crash. What really satisfied my beliefs was when I was 16 years old, I was visiting Japan on a school trip. We were visiting Kyoto, and we were visiting Heian-kyo, a beautiful place with a ton of history. If you've never been, you should look into it as a bucket list item. As I was leaving, an elderly Japanese man came up to me, attempting to tell me something. His son translated for him. "He says you are followed by Nopero. You should be cleansed." "What is the Napabo? What?" Son translates, "Napero bear. It is an ancient Japanese legend of faceless ghost. This yokel creature will take the form of others and replace them. He says you must be cleansed." "Well, how do I get cleansed?" Son translates, "He says you can do it. It's very simple prayer. Just hold still." I don't want to bore you guys with the rest of the details. Essentially, he made some hand motions and spoke Japanese for a few minutes, touched my shoulder, and walked away. Now, I'm not sure if this guy was genuinely trying to cleanse me, if he was crazy, or what. But I'll tell you this much. I did do some research on the Napora Boa, and actually did feel what he said made sense, but nothing really changed. For nearly 10 years, I still felt wary of the dark in my own house. Still jumped at every little creak or when the AC header would kick on, and I still slept with a blanket over my head. Until I met my wife. I did say earlier that I would explain my theory about the blanket. I feel that all kids hide under their blanket when they're scared. If I can't see it, it can't see me kind of mentality. I actually feel this is true. If something is coming to take me in my sleep, how's it going to take me if it can't find me? I still have 9-year-old logic when it comes to monsters under the bed. When I met my wife, I stopped feeling as if I was being watched. After a while, I really didn't think that much about my paranoid fears anymore. We were together for about 2 years before we married, and we've been married for about 2 years now, so I found 4 years of peace, and have 2 lovely children. A 2-year-old son and a week-old daughter. Finally found peace. Until just recently. We co-sleep, so our week-old baby is in our bed and our 2-year-old's room is down the hall. He became interested in sleeping by himself just about 3 or 4 months ago. He still sleeps with us here and there though, because he has begun to have nightmares. Once my son started sleeping in his own room, I started getting that being watched feeling again. Every time I'm in that part of my house, I feel paranoid. My house is significantly larger than when I was a child. We have 3 levels to my home now. The top floor holds 3 bedrooms, including the master bedroom and my son's bedroom. Every time I tuck him in, I feel like there's something in the room with us that I cannot see. I haven't had night terrors in a long time. Normally, I can hardly remember my dreams, but last night I had a dream that really freaked me out. In my dream, my son was sitting in the middle of his bedroom laughing as I was approaching him. He was facing away from me, just laughing hysterically. As I got closer, he turned towards me and his face wasn't his face. It was gone completely. Just a shield of skin covering where his face should be. But I could still hear the laughter. I awoke to laughing in our room. In my groggy state, I didn't recognize the voice that was talking. All I heard was, "Oh, we'll get you. Hollow you out. Make your eyes right. Make your eyes right. Make. Hi, Daddy." Once my eyes adjusted, I could see my 2-year-old son staring at me while rubbing our daughter's head. Story 2. I've been on an expedition to Vermont for some time now with my friend, and we've seen some pretty unexplainable things. People think that because we live in such a rural state that is pretty much in Canada, that nothing happens here. We have some cities like St. Albans, Burlington and Rutland, but most of these are really more large towns than anything and surrounded by what is pretty much just suburban areas. Outside of these pockets of civilization are rural areas, mostly farmland or trees. In these areas, safety is in the dim-lit farmhouses that scatter the hundreds of miles of forest. One night, travelling up the main roads in Vermont, I saw something I will never forget. To this day, I still do not know what the hell it was, and I hope I never see it again. I was doing a midnight hike with my friend and my girlfriend up one of the mountains in Vermont. We went through a rural area where you can see mostly farmland for miles, but it's very hilly. We were joking and having fun, talking about how amazing it was to see the stars so late. My girlfriend sat in the passenger side, and she was going through her pictures she took of the starry night. We began to talk about how creepy it can be driving in the hills. When you go through the rural areas of Vermont and wind down the roads, you sometimes feel like you might be seeing shadows in the farmlands, or you think you saw a flash cross your headlights. Legitimately, driving at night can be scary for wildlife reasons too. Moose are massive creatures, and if you ever run into them, you're more likely to see a black mass in front of you. Oftentimes you can chalk up many of these shadows to just being merely wildlife. This night was different. When we crested one of the hills, we were going probably about 40 miles per hour. We saw a man standing in the middle of the road, so we began to slow down. My friend Steve and my girlfriend Mary both looked at me. "What is he doing?" Steve said. "I don't know." We drew closer pretty quickly, even though I was slowing down. He was a black, hooded man. The robes he was wearing came down to the pavement. He seemed almost to float off the ground. I was feeling an intense feeling of dread. As we passed by the figure, I turned my head to look at it. I continued moving down the road. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't see hands or legs or feet. They were either covered up or not there entirely. I sped up when I noticed this. "Fuck this shit," I said out loud. "Babe," Mary screamed. I thought she was getting mad. I had just floored it and was now going 90 miles per hour down a straight but hilly road, cresting a hill and literally coming off the ground at the top. Or so it felt. "Babe, look!"
Mary screamed, pointing at the window. When I turned my head, there the shadow figure was. He was floating right next to my car, just as he had before. I swerved, trying to hit whatever this monster thing was, but it swerved with me. I continued down the road as fast as I could, but it just followed. The glass in the car started to fog up, and Mary turned on the heater trying to defrost the windows, but they fogged up more and more. I used my wiper blades to try to give myself more visibility, but it was getting to the point where I couldn't see anything anymore. Then I started to see the streetlights. I had to stop at this point because I couldn't see the road anymore. We sat in the car, all staring at each other in silence, wondering if we should open the door and look out. I put my hazards on and heard a car pass me, or what I thought was a car. I figured that was a good sign it was gone. I opened the door and saw nothing for miles. No shadow figure, no person for miles except the red tail lights of the car. Being a hilly area, I suppose whatever it was could have gone off somewhere, especially if it was going 90 miles per hour. As the fresh air rushed in and the windows began to defog, we all got out and stood looking around. "What just happened?" Mary said, laughing an awkward sort of laugh. Steve just stared into a field. I looked down at my feet, my heart still pounding in my ears. It was 2 p.m. I did not know what the hell was going on, and I wanted to get home and sleep. We were outside of a good-sized town by now, and when the windows defogged, we got back into the car and drove off down the road, not seeing anything paranormal again. But we were all quiet. It's something you don't talk about after it happens. How can you explain what you saw and what you experienced? Later the next day we talked about it, and Steve and Mary both felt that feeling of dread. They both told me at one point before the windows fogged up, it looked like the creatures had turned its head around and was trying to reach the car but hit the window. Steve mentioned that he thought that was maybe why the windows began to fog up. I used to enjoy long rides home in rural areas of Vermont at night. I love seeing the stars with no light pollution. Now, I'll stick to the interstate, or better yet, I'll just stay home. Story 3. It started when I was about 9 years old. I was terrified of ghost stories and ghosts in general. I'm a pretty sensitive person when it comes to ghosts. I actually can feel when there is something attached to an object, let alone an actual ghost. The best way I can describe it is that you feel a slight out-of-body experience when entering a room, like your soul lifts out of your body for a second, then jumps back. Anyway, we moved into a new house when I was 9, and my mum said she felt there was something upstairs watching her. We are religious people, and the church was helping us move, so with the pastor's wife there, they told the spirit or ghost to leave. All day the front door began to close on its own. No wind outside at all. My mum said that was because the ghosts were all leaving. I became terrified to go upstairs, and when I peeked around the corner I literally felt like something was watching me. I know the ghost was gone now, because since then the feeling went away. Now skip to age 13. I was obsessed with ghost hunters. At first, my mum told me not to watch it. It would just scare me, she said. But then she started to get into it too. I decided that it would be fun to ghost hunt myself, and we went to a creamery by my house. I really wish I could give more info on the building with pictures, but due to my current situation I don't think that's a good idea. The creamery is abandoned and was owned by this creepy guy with schizophrenia. Abandoned in that the guy never took care of it and it was in total disrepair. I had an older friend named Steve, and he talked to him and asked if he could have a tour of the place. The guy told him he would, then in the next breath yelled at him that if he ever caught him in the place, he would kill him. My friend is a pretty chill guy, so he just took it as whatever, and we planned to go in and ghost hunt. That experience has changed me forever. I need to set the stage a bit here to give you a clear idea of how creepy this place is. The building is made of cement, but the second extension is made of brick. The brick side is in total disrepair. The roof and the second floor have caved in. The second floor has a spot where you can stand on one side and a spot on the other side completely unreachable now. I wish I could show you a picture of the graffiti inside. It's so beautiful. Nearly everything inside is tagged with the most incredible murals, mostly apocalyptic type stuff. One massive room in the front of the building is covered head to toe in like tattoos. There's a fallen catwalk that has a ladder down to the first floor in this big room. The second floor also has an old burned bed. Remember this part. It's important later. There's another room that was a freezer, I'm pretty sure. Downstairs, I have a very hard time giving a layout. You have to go in the winter because there's always about 3 to 6 feet of water in the place. It's begun to look more like a cave downstairs. I'll try to describe as best I can. So there's that big room with the catwalk. There's 2 doors, one to the left facing the ladder I mentioned, and one in front under the catwalk. If you take the left, it brings you to a smaller room with a huge generator type thing in it. The walls have also broken down, but the entrance is right to the right when you walk in past the generator. Then you walk into the room where it's made of brick. There's a blocked off room off this room we couldn't get into. Then there's a room off the same room to the left where it leads to an exit and another smaller room that has no lights or anything, just a big box. Naturally, this is a spot people smoke pot and do drugs. Going back into the main large room, if you took a path under the catwalk, you would go into a room that goes down into a sub-floor area. At the time, it was winter. Under the 6 feet of ice there was debris, old sinks, a bike, a wheel, a couch sticking up out of it. Just stuff. The man who owns it is a hoarder, so it's not really surprising. Then you can go up a set of stairs to a weird spot. A place that leads to another exit and has a kitchen sink and then another room that is just cabinets. Someone must have been living there like legally recently. Now that I'm older, I think about it and it kind of creeps me out. It wasn't one of those huge satellite dishes from the 90s, but a newer one, so at the time it must have been around 2006. So probably a few years old at most, I'd guess 5? Someone can correct me if I'm wrong maybe. Smaller satellites are a real thing. So let's get to the meat of the experience now that you have a general idea of what the place is like. We walked in on the second floor. It's the safest way in, my friend Steve said. There were 3 of us, Steve, myself, and a friend, Devon. We opened the door to the first room and were instantly shocked. I had my voice recorder and extra batteries just in case. I logged the EVP session, and then instantly swore because 2 full mannequins were staring straight at the door. "What the honest fuck?" Steve swore. Definitely a weird way to start the session. My friend Devon wanted to leave, but we told him that the guy probably put them there just to ward off people. We did the session and took pictures. Nothing strange happened really, other than feeling creepy the entire time. But in every room I got that feeling I mentioned before, like my soul had jumped out of my body for a second. We went down the ladder and I began doing another EVP session while walking around. We smelt something absolutely horrible. We tracked it down. Someone had been doing cockfights. Dead, torn-up roosters were dumped in that subfloor thing. I felt sick not from the smell, but as an animal person, I felt sick because of those poor roosters. When we got into the brick part, I took a video. I felt like I saw a shadow looking over. I asked Steve and Devon if they saw it. They said no, but it felt like someone was definitely watching us. The camera was grainy, and even when I played it back, I didn't know if I could see anything. That's when something dropped. I shit you not, a brick was thrown at one of us. We looked around, the whole place was full of bricks, but we all agreed we saw a brick fly towards us. We knew to get out we had to go all the way back up the stairs and run out unless we wanted to get caught. We all freaked out, and I told them we should just leave that area and go and do an EVP session somewhere else. Devon wanted out, but Steve and I told him to stay. If he left and there was a malicious ghost, it would probably target him once he left the group. We went into the other side of the house and did an EVP session. There's a part I didn't really describe because I didn't know how to. I've never been down that way. But there's another part of the creamery altogether that is really dark because it has no windows. I'm not even joking when I say I saw a full figure of a man standing still. No face, just standing there, a shadow man. I have never been so horrified in my entire life. Devon and Steve looked at me. "What's wrong, Vincent?" they said. "Don't you see it?" I whispered, pointing to the shadow. They both grew pale. Now, I wasn't the smartest kid, but this was presumably my dumbest moment. I called out to the shadow. "Excuse me. I'm a ghost hunter and..." I thought I was being smart. All the ghost hunters on the show would freak out when they saw a shadow. It began to move forward. It wasn't walking. It was floating. And I knew it was looking right at me. My body was riddled with total fear at this point. Steve grabbed me and pulled me towards the exit. We left and ran so far from that place. It is on a main road, so we could have been caught so easy, but we didn't care. When we were far enough away, I looked back and just felt like it was there watching us. "Are you the most fucking retarded kid in the world? Why would you talk to it?" Devon yelled at me. "I just wanted to know." "You don't talk to shadows, dumb fuck," Steve joined in. I apologized and we went home, leaving me to analyze the audio and video. I'm not sure if the shadow or the audio scared me more. There was a shadow looking on the video, but it was so grainy I couldn't tell. The audio started off fine on the second floor, but when we got to the bed, there was a distant crackling sound. I wrote it off as paint chips falling off the ceiling, but now I know different. Then I heard a voice, a distant scream so soft but of complete pain. I stopped and listened again. I called my mum over. She heard it too. My blood went cold and I listened more, but there was nothing else on the first EVP. The second was much more chilling. Downstairs, I was asking questions. Apparently the building was built on the Underground Railroad. So I was asking if the ghost was a slave. And an Irish-accented man said, "Fuck you." No, I'm not joking. At first I thought maybe he was saying, "I got you." But I don't think so. It wouldn't make much sense given the context, and it sounded like 2 syllables, except there were no doors. Then we go to the part of the shadow. I could hear very distinctly and clearly, "You burn me. You are killers." I had no idea what it meant, but I still have shivers down my whole body thinking about it today. I compiled a video and uploaded it to YouTube. Unfortunately, in my attempt at becoming big on YouTube, I took it down for fear someone would use it as a way to find out where I lived. I've totally lost the footage of the EVPs. I'm kind of glad too, because it scares the hell out of me every time I listen to them or think of that day. Now, are you ready for the truly most terrifying and crazy part? When I was 15, I decided to volunteer at a local historical society. We were going through old pictures of the creamery, and I asked the older lady who was the director if she remembered when the creamery was operational. My step-great-grandfather had worked there. At once I asked her if she knew him and if he was in any of the pictures. We found one of the workers sitting in front of the place. She pointed him out. Then I asked if there was anyone who was Irish, and she said a few, and pointed at them. I paused. Did anyone die of an accident? She looked at me strange, but didn't ask questions. She pointed one of the Irish guys out. He fell off the catwalk and died on impact. I know this sounds terrible, but did anyone else die? I didn't want to give too much away. She said no, but then remembered something. A homeless man was burned to death while sleeping in his bed. 3 kids were smoking and he passed out drunk. The ash burned him alive, she said. My face grew pale. I was in total shock. I told her everything, and if I hadn't deleted the video, I would have showed her. She didn't know what to make of the story. I don't think she believed me, honestly. That burnt bed, the voices and the shadows. There were 3 of us, and that spirit must have thought we were those kids. I've never gone back, and I never will. Since then, the owner has died, and I hope and pray that fucking building is destroyed. Every time I go by there, I just know that shadow is watching me. Before that, I wanted to restore the building to its old prestige. Now, I just want it gone. Thank you for listening to and/or watching this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Just want to say a big thank you to all of my current subscribers. It is really encouraging to see how much this channel has grown since I started. I also wanted to quickly apologize for the inconsistency in sound quality in this video. I've just got a new microphone and I'm just adjusting to the difference in sound quality. I do apologize if it picks up a bit more mouth noise or echo. I hope soon to get a vocal isolation booth, that way I can be a lot more consistent. Once again, thanks for watching.